Hey, what's up, everyone? This is James Jesso from Adventures for the Mind, and I would like to talk to you today about my current thoughts on ayahuasca.
Poner son los ícaros de protección y después también preparar la ayahuasca con ícaros. Y después beber.
The reason that I am doing this is because I was recently asked by a patron, where are your thoughts now with ayahuasca? I've gone on the record telling my story of interacting with ayahuasca over the last few years, and I've gotten both mostly positive but some critical feedback with the fact that I haven't really been very pro ayahuasca. In fact, I've been very pro recognize the dangers, recognize the darkness, because a lot of my experiences have been quite dark. In fact, I even suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder for 2 years that was directly associated with an event that happened on ayahuasca. Anyways, it's a good question, and I kind of want to wrap my own head around it, I guess, in a way, because I'm at a very interesting place because I both feel finished with ayahuasca and open to experiencing it again. And I guess where I'm at is a little bit paradoxical because I believe that it could be a very positive, healing, life-transforming experience for somebody. And I also believe that it could be very detrimental and life-degrading and damaging experience for somebody to have. And it really all depends on the context in which that experience is had and the person that is having that experience and where they're at in their life. I think it was ayahuasca amongst the other sort of primary psychedelics that are in the mainstream is one that I think that we're most susceptible to becoming confused by because it's such an experience of such gravity. I mean, there's a lot of gravity to other experiences. As much as I'm not sure how I feel about Aubrey Marcus and his warrior poet high-level marketing push around psychedelics and some of the content that he's creating. He has some interesting ideas, for example, that doing ayahuasca is like getting open heart surgery, and it does really feel like it has that level of gravity. Either way, ayahuasca really confused me for a little while, and I think I was confused before I even had it. So let's unpack where I'm coming from when I make the statement of where I'm at with ayahuasca now. I did it for the first time in 2013. I had 2 experiences. I wrote about them in an article or a short story called Ayahuasca and I, which you can read on my website. The link is in the description below this video. And the first night was very blissful. I had come in, mostly with just having watched documentaries like Shamans of the Amazon and read books around ayahuasca. I didn't know very many people who had done it, and the people that I did know who had done it had a very surface interaction with it, like maybe once or twice. I hadn't really sat and gotten an in-depth perspective from somebody who had drank it many times. Anyway, so I went in with this both academic and personal curiosity because I looked up to ayahuasca in a way. I was like, wow, like the ayahuasca, it's such a big thing. It's such an important ancient medicine. And I'm saying it with this tone, but it's not that the statements themselves are trivial or anything, but I came in with this strong naivete. And my first experience was absolutely blissful and amazing. And I threw up, I purged, and everything just felt so perfect in a way. This purge was super intense, but then one of the shamans or one of the assistants had come by and smudged me and I felt so seen and loved and blessed. I felt like everyone I knew needed to drink ayahuasca. I needed, in fact, to leave that very moment and run to the hills and text everyone that I know, and tell them, like, you've got to do ayahuasca. It's the healing mother medicine. I felt like I had found my path. I was going to drop everything and become a shaman. And and I could hear the ayahuasca talking to me in my head even the next day. And I was just in it. And then the second night, there was no integration circles or anything like that. It was just people were at the retreat. You drank. The next day you roamed around waiting to drink the next night. And the next night, things got very turbulent. This is a part of the story. I won't go too deep into it because you can read about it. But I basically decided that the ayahuasca was a parasitic entity from another dimension that was basically making everyone in the room delirious so that it could harvest the energy of their pain and pleasure, and that it situates religious cults. It was a religious cult, and it was a religious cult around a parasitic plant entity that was harvesting the consciousness energy of the people there. And people fall in love with it because that's a part of the trap. The way the vine grows around a tree, it just attaches to you. And that the shamans were like the warriors and the missionaries of this evil entity. And I couldn't trust anyone, and I ran away and didn't really get the support I needed. And it was a really fucking crazy experience that left me delirious for a long while and thinking that I was dying and just a lot of stuff. The primary thing was that it confronted me eventually with the acknowledgement that everything that I once believed in as real and valuable and promising in my spirituality was just a bunch of bullshit, smoke and mirrors. None of it was real. I was a fool, and all the sort of existential suffrage that comes along with the foundations upon which one's spiritual identity is structured being ripped away in a violent and chaotic sea of psychedelic implication. Eventually, I gave up and basically had a mystical experience. But the point is that after all of that, I was very cynical. That's when I started telling this story. And I was cynical and angry and had mostly become a bit of a materialist in a way. A lot of my writing around that time focused very heavily on like a purely intellectualized approach to the psychedelic experience. And I started telling this story, and I told it twice. And one of the times that I told it, because the story ultimately ends saying, like, it's not an entity, and it's not a parasite, and it's not a divine entity, and it's not a god or goddess or a deity. It just is whatever manifests itself as in your experience relative to your personal approach and the context. It's just smoke and mirrors of consciousness, and it's meaningful, sure, but don't let yourself fall into the trap of religious ideology, ancient plant medicine or not. But I still felt, after I told the story a second time at Astro Harvest, that, well, I don't want to be that guy that had a couple bum trips and then goes around telling a bunch of people, this hard and difficult story, although everyone who heard the story felt really positively touched by it, except for a few people who felt like I was committing heresy for speaking against the mother. But either way, I didn't want to be that guy. So I decided, okay, I'm going to stop telling this story. I'm going to drink ayahuasca again. Fast forward 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, without having done anything about it, I am now being invited down to Peru to drink ayahuasca. So I end up going down to Peru and drinking ayahuasca 8 times over the course of 2.5 weeks in 2 different retreats. In the middle of that, and most of that was quite positive and interesting, but in the middle of that, I had a severe medical emergency, which I'm not going to unpack here because I'm going to write a book about it, and I don't want to give away the story. But it's scattered across the rest of my stuff, so if you want to find it, you can find it somewhere. Anyways, I have a medical emergency. I don't get the appropriate aftercare that I would need to come and make sense of that, not at the retreat, which was not a lack in the retreat's care, but a lack in their preparedness for such an extreme experience. It wasn't necessarily prepared for some white boy to freak out and nearly die on the walkway outside the Maloka. But anyways,
to be clear, that retreat did their absolute best to care for me and did a pretty damn good job given how spontaneous and intense my emergency was. The lack of aftercare was less because of the retreat itself and more because that event happened on the last night of that retreat, and instead of returning to civilization to recover or staying with the group as they went to Cusco, I got dropped off on the side of the road for my next retreat on their way back to Iquitos. Honestly, it probably would have been a better choice for me to take some time to recover and spend some, rehabilitation time coming back into civilization, but I had this maybe ill-gotten concept that I was on a journey and I couldn't be weak. I needed to just keep drinking the ayahuasca. Let it break me down. Let it break me down. I gotta go deep. Anyways, back to the story.
After that, I got really traumatized, and not going to go too deep into that, but I felt like this antagonism with ayahuasca, not like, oh, it's an entity, it's a parasite kind of hatred, but more just like, why did you hurt me? Like, why am I hurting? And what do I need to do to heal it? And everything that I was going through in my trauma was directly associated to losing my physical and cognitive capacities to an altered state. And so I kept trying all these different psychedelics to try to make sense of it and studying all this stuff, like hyper intellectualized focus mode on all this stuff to understand trauma and understand the brain. If you look at my work from that time, it's very like neurocentric. It's really brain oriented. But eventually I kind of, this is skipping a lot of important details, but the point is I saw that there was a healing potential for ayahuasca, but I also saw that there was a strong possibility for damage people, because it damaged me. And when I was talking about it, I got a lot of emails from people being like, it damaged me too, and I don't know how to come back from it. In all the research that I did over the course of that time, what I ultimately came to decide is that the only way, what I came to recognize is that I encountered an experience that was acutely, like the critical aspect of it was acutely in the ayahuasca ceremony and the events that happened at that time. But my susceptibility to such an experience being so overwhelming was bred of a context, or was born from a context that was rooted in my personal history, which is then intertwined in my relational dynamics from childhood and possibly beyond. But the point was, is I recognized that although the ayahuasca was, the event that happened on the ayahuasca was related to the ayahuasca, it also wasn't related to the ayahuasca. It was related to a deep felt experience that was too much, too soon, too fast, and my nervous system just did what it needed to do, and it freaked the fuck out. And without the appropriate support to finish the fear and the pain and the terror and the absolute existential suffering that I faced on that night, it developed into trauma. And the only way for me to then heal the trauma would be to discharge the pent-up emotions, which is, we'll just summarize as terror of dying, and to discharge them through feeling them, and to re-assimilate or to complete those experiences, having endowed them with the meaningfulness of safety, because I felt so unsafe. And that's part of why I ended up being traumatized, was because of how unsafe I was in my pain and delirious. And so I came to this decision that the only way for me to heal from the trauma that was associated to this critical event that happened during ayahuasca was to finish the feelings and to reintegrate them with a meaningfulness of completion and surrender and resolution by drinking ayahuasca again, which might sound ridiculous, but also turned out to work. So I end up going to this trauma healing retreat. I knew that if I was going to do ayahuasca again, I couldn't just do it with anyone. I needed to do it with somebody and in some group with people who I trusted that they understood what it was I was going to go through, and had a framework to hold me in it, and had a framework to help me reintegrate it in a way that would be life-giving and no longer life denigrating, which it had been. And I ended up connecting with somebody who I already had a deep trust with, and we had been colleagues for a little while, or at least some degree of being colleagues and some degree of being friends, and I really trusted this person, and they were operating a trauma healing retreat. The trauma healing retreat came with 2 ayahuasca ceremonies and group facilitated psychotherapy before and after, where the majority of this 5-day retreat was actually focused on establishing strong container of emotional, psychological, relational safety within the group, so that the felt experience of pain and the emotional energy of trauma could be expressed and could be reintegrated, and the ayahuasca worked as a catalyst to sort of really set the energies of the unconscious free, so that they could be felt, explored, reintegrated, and endowed with new meaning in the context of this, in the context of that particular container. It worked really well. It worked really well, although it was really difficult. I ended up having to face everything all over again, and despite feeling like I knew in advance that it wasn't going to be real, I couldn't seem to shake the sense that it was all happening again. I was really dying, and I was really I had that same parasite thought come up, and that nobody could be trusted, and everyone here's on ayahuasca, we're in the middle of the woods, and I might be dying. I'm definitely dying. I am dying right now. There's nobody here to help me. I'm so afraid. I hate this drug. It's a fucking poison. Get it the fuck out of me. Putrid brew, fingers on my throat, trying to stop myself, trying to get it out of me. And I was so afraid. And eventually I was being held by somebody there, one of the therapists, one of the facilitators. And although I didn't trust the ayahuasca, I didn't trust that I wasn't dying. I actually believed that they were hypnotized by this drug. But in the midst of all of that confusion, there was one thing that I could trust in, which is that regardless of all of it, I know that that person cares for my well-being. And that little sliver was enough to help me come down from a panic attack I was having, and enough with that, plus the whole support of the larger team, to really help me help myself, help me bring myself back to trust and love and surrender. And it's a fucking crazy story what I went through that I'm not going to tell you right now. Really, honestly, one of the most excruciating and enlightening experiences I've ever had, that probably would have just put me into a mental institution for the rest of my life if I hadn't had it in the context of this particular container. Anyways, that worked for me. It really did work for me, that trauma healing retreat. It was based on a trauma-informed relational somatic group facilitated psychotherapy, maybe. I can't remember the exact name, but it really helped me. And afterwards, being able to talk with the group and talk with the facilitators over Skype, and really helped me come back to myself. And I felt completed, and I felt finished with ayahuasca completely. All right, I wrote that book. I mean, in my mind, I wrote the book because I have a narrative story metaphor for how I relate to my life experiences. I will literally write the book at some point. But I felt like I was done with the book of ayahuasca. And I could see then sort of this rounded experience. It's yep, it can be really beautiful, but it can also be really terrifying, and it can hurt you, and it can help you, and it can give you clarity, and it can confuse you. And it can be positive, and it can be negative. And like I said at the beginning, it really depends on the context in which the ayahuasca is used, externally and internally, which is the sort of inner emotional, psychological context of the person using it. And then I ended up reading Rachel Harris's book, listening to ayahuasca. I ended up interviewing her. It's linked in the description below. And she, reading her book, it was like, maybe I could come back. Maybe I could go back to the ayahuasca. Maybe I still can. I don't know. Sometimes I feel ready. Other times I feel not ready. And other times I feel somewhere in the middle. And other times I don't even think about it. Most of the time I'm not thinking about it. But when I am thinking about it, it's one of those 3 possible options. And yeah, I guess that's what I mean by now. Like I'm curious, and I have this sort of paradox sliding scale perspective on ayahuasca now. So thank you very much for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it and felt it was valuable. Part of what I'm doing here with this YouTube channel and with my podcast, my written work, is to try to create content that works as an anchor for discourse, discourse that adds to the larger psychedelic literacy of psychedelic culture. So if you have an experience with ayahuasca and you're looking to share that experience or share some perspective or look for help or look for support, please utilize the comments at jameswjesso.com, or YouTube tends to be a little bit more active at YouTube than at my website, but I'd love you to comment on my website. Do so. Reach out. If you are specifically looking for some help coming out of a bad trip, coming out of a terrifying psychedelic experience that you have not been able to integrate, I feel very competent and confident that I can help you. So if you would like some of that support, I've left a link in the description below for you to reach out to me. Anyways, again, thank you very much for watching this video, and whatever it is that you might be going through right now, if it's tough, I wish you the best and all the support that you need to come out the other side in a positive way. I know that it's possible. Thanks.
Y después beber. Y durante el trabajo